Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Flex Network. I'm your host, Shane Seeley, aka Flex Shane. I'm joined by my boy, Season Long Says, who sometimes goes by Alan Sazlowski. What's
Once
going
in
on,
a while,
brother?
my friend. Once in a while. What's up, Shane? Good morning. Happy Sunday morning.
Happy
Um,
Sunday.
as usual, here to talk a little off-season football. Some of my favorite time of the year.
Oh, absolutely. So today's show, we are doing our first officially unofficial mock draft for our rookie dynasty leagues. And I got to say, I'm pretty excited. I mean, there's been some discussions for the last couple of years that this is probably looking to be one of the best rookie crops that we've seen in a number of years. Some people are saying that the wide receiver crop is going to be one of the best since 2014, and I think this is a fun year for dynasty. So I'm looking forward to it. What are
Every
your
year is a
initial
fun.
thoughts?
Every
Every year.
year is a fun year with Dynasty. But yeah, and I mean, this rookie class. Now, you heard a lot about it coming into the year that it's really deep. And I think that last year people thought it was going to be a weaker rookie class, and that proved to be false, especially with the wide receiver talent that emerged. I think the rookie class took a little bit of hit of depth when Clemson running back Travis Etienne decided not to come back. He was probably going to be a top three running back in the class. He'll probably be the RB1 next year. And also the running back from Alabama decided not to come out as well. That definitely put a damper on the class. But, again, to add some depth to next year, there's still plenty of goodies to go around. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go back and forth, doing it as, you're going to operate teams 1, 3, 5, all the odd numbers. I'm going to operate all the teams with the even numbers. And we're going to do our first rookie draft as if we were in a dynasty league, give our rationale, give some thoughts on, how we construct dynasty teams. And of course, landing spot dependent will change these things. But here's a first pass. Anyone listening to this podcast right now is just as crazy about off-season dynasty football as we are. So why don't you tell me first? I'm curious before we get into the draft. How do you basically, not just a rookie draft, how do you construct teams? What's your way to do it with startup drafts? Because I just finished a startup draft and it went, somewhat according to plan, not 100%.
Yeah, no, that's a tough question because, to be honest, I'm still trying to really. My strategy is evolving as I think it should. Right, it's going to be based on your perspective and how you kind of view the game. But through the years, I don't know, let's call it young fantasy football Shane. I always like to have those running backs, but I really was enamored by a lot of those wide receivers, like having a couple stud wide receivers on my team. But the last couple seasons, both in dynasty as well as just season-long leagues, I'm really starting to believe that you need to have your core running backs. You need some of those stud running backs to really secure you every single week, as well as to help you get into the playoffs. And really just the idea behind that is that if you can get yourself in some of these high-end, like Saquon Barkley, CMCs, the guys that are going to be putting up a pretty solid floor every single week, then I find that you can pretty much build your team around some of these younger dynamic wide receivers that are going to be putting up pretty consistent points. I mean, giving you between 12 to 17 points any given week in a PPR league. And that's going to help you get into the playoffs. And ultimately, that strength at the top with your running backs is going to help you win in the playoffs. So my perspective is you really want to get a young stud RB core, and that should be your priority. And then you can pretty much build a lot around the wide receivers just because there's so many wide receivers now. And I just don't think there's as many of those stud running backs. So that's the approach I like to take in my season-long leagues. It's the approach I'm starting to take in my dynasty leagues as I've been doing it for more and more years now. And I think that's the approach that a lot of people are going to be taking this year in their dynasty rookie drafts.
Yeah, now I have a little bit different approach, and I don't know if this is more of a traditional approach or not, but in Dynasty Startup, in one QB, we're not talking about Superflex right now. I think that the window where running backs, even the elite ones, can be relevant is shorter than that of wide receivers. So I usually try to build my Dynasty teams, and again, that's what's so great about Dynasty. There's so many paths to take, is trying to get 3 receivers that I know are young, going to be there for a long time, because I feel like running backs are easier to find. You could always find a Phillip Lindsay on the waiver wire, or when the year he came out, or Raheem Mostert to fill in here and there, where it's almost impossible to find a wide receiver that's going to give you week in and week out consistent production. You know, I'm always going to default to starting my dynasty team with this trio of, say, Michael Thomas, DJ Moore, and who would be a third round receiver? Just say, you know, AJ Brown, then starting it with Christian McCaffrey and say Aaron Jones, and then grabbing my first receiver. So again, no wrong way, no right or wrong answer here, just different ways to get to the destination. Just because I find it easier to find running backs on a week-to-week basis than I do with wide receivers.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's totally fair. And I think that's the thing about fantasy football in general, is that there's lots of ways to skin the cat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we've all been productive. So, okay, so let's jump into just your process for some of these rookies, because like, full disclosure, I'm not a college football guy, right? I'm an NFL guy. Throughout the season, all our analysis is typically on just the NFL season. So once pretty much, you know, once playoffs start, right, it's the end of the college football season, that's when I really start to, you know, just dip my toe into the rookie crop that's upcoming. But pretty much for the last couple weeks, I've been what's the term, hot and heavy for some of these rookies. And, you know, it's a big learning process. So the approach I take is I start to listen to a lot of different podcasts, and I think that's important, right? You have to have varying perspectives, because, you know, a lot of the times there's the stat heads, right? The guys who are all about the metrics. There's other guys that are in the camp of the film watching, you know, some people call them the film grinders. I like to think that we're kind of in between, right? I mean,
Sure.
I think everybody really is in between, but oftentimes people like to go on one end of the spectrum in terms of how they define themselves. And so I like to listen to a lot of different podcasts. I listen to SiriusXM, do a lot of reading, a lot of articles, and just really familiarize myself with like the top end, right? Who you think the NFL is going to be drafting, who we think is going to be good for our dynasty teams, and then really try to get my opinion together. And so I think my approach in the draft today is going to be a little bit about, okay, some of the players I've watched, some of the players I've heard, some industry consensus top players, and some guys that have heard that draft scouts like, because ultimately landing spot is super important, right? And we can't be going and taking a guy in the first round of a rookie draft that's drafted in like the 7th round of the NFL draft. It's just not realistic. So what approach do you like to take, Al?
Yeah, no, I think what you just said is very smart, and I think that is a perfectly reasonable approach. How I do it is not too far different, but I actually do have a laid out process every year, and I start with literally looking at the film, and not just the YouTube highlights. There's a bunch of different sites where they can really isolate the the rookies, the incoming rookies, and show you their plays, not just the ones where they're highlight and break off a huge run or make a diving catch, but what they do. So I try to form an opinion by watching a little bit of film. And then, you know, I do a sanity check with some of the various podcasts and analysts that I respect, and just see where that lines up. And, you know, the truth is no one really knows right now. And then obviously, the first 7 guys in our mock draft today, I could shut number 7 can end up being number 1. Absolutely. Based on landing spot. So that's ultimately important. But yeah, you want to definitely bet on talent. And I think that holds true more for wide receiver than it does for running back. Because there's a few names that we're going to talk about today that they might be my running back 6 or 7 that could easily shoot up the board, as I tweeted about the other day, that could be my RB 1 or 2 in the right landing spot. So that said, let's have a first pass at this. Yes. Let's see what happens. And then it'll be interesting to circle back to this. I mean, today is February 16th. When we have our rookie draft sometime in July, we'll see how true this holds.
Okay, I'm gonna just say one thing, Al. Yeah. I mean, July's late for a lot of rookie drafts. I know that we try to push it in our dynasty league together as late as possible. A lot of these like dynasty guys and gals, they like to have their draft like early May or like mid-May, which is crazy.
I mean, no, it's not, because everyone has the same disadvantage, you know? I mean, I think that I think that this benefits people picking at the end of the draft, because sometimes, you know, I don't know. You just never know. I mean, we did our draft later, and it looked very different than it would have looked early. I mean, if you
Oh,
drafted
yes.
right after the real NFL draft was over, you got Terry McLaurin at the end of round 3, probably the beginning of round 4. If you drafted closer to the actual NFL draft, you had to jump up until the middle of round 2. So Dawson Knox wasn't drafted in a few drafts right after the actual NFL draft, and
Yep.
in our draft in July, he went in the middle of round 3.
Yeah, there you
Now
go.
he'd probably be a round 2 pick if we drafted rookies over. So yeah, that said, let's hop into it,
GDS.
Shane. Why don't you? So with the first pick in the 2020 very early mock draft, Team Shane Seeley selects.
I'm going to select Jonathan Taylor, running back of Wisconsin. Okay, so running back Wisconsin, I'm going to pull up some of his metrics here, right? All right, so Jonathan Taylor, who I think, at the top, I don't think there's a consensus right now. It's pretty open in terms of who people think is going to be the one-on-one. I think more than anything, this is going to be really landing spot dependent. But Jonathan Taylor, in terms of the raw stats, I mean, this is a guy that he had 1,909 rushing yards in his in the 2019 season. He had 299 rush attempts, which some people might say is actually a knock against the guy. He's not necessarily known for his ability to catch the ball, but he still did have 209 reception yards and 24 receptions last year. And I think he's in 21 rush TDs and 5 reception TDs. This is a guy who a lot of people are maybe a little bit worried about just in terms of his total touches. I want to say he's got the most total touches of all the rookie running backs. But I think it has a lot more to do with the wear and tear. And this guy hasn't really suffered any major injuries. And so I'm not really worried about the touches in college. What do you think about Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Jonathan Taylor is going to be a first-round fantasy pick. I have him right now rated as my RB4 in this class, so
Okay.
we obviously have a differing opinion. There's, Jonathan Taylor is shaping up to be one of the more polarizing picks. Not whether he's going to be good or not, but whether he's the top of the heap. His lack of pass catching ability is a little bit concerning in PPR leagues, but he looks like he is going to be a monster. I think that he's the perfect Devontae Freeman replacement in Atlanta. I think that would be a great spot for him or any of these running backs. But if the Titans decide to let Derrick Henry walk, again, this is another player that fits that scheme. Not the route I would have gone, but who the hell knows? Jonathan Taylor's, it's a rock solid top 5 fantasy pick in rookie drafts.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I'm going to surprise nobody right here. And what it seems to be the consensus RB1, is settling in as my RB1 as well, and that is DeAndre Swift of Georgia. I mean, what can't you say about him? He's got elite pass catching ability. He can fit any scheme. He is the prototypical modern day running back. I think he has all the best parts of Alvin Kamara mixed with I'm trying to think of any plus runner. To me, he's the clear best talent. Now, if he's likely to, I have a feeling, not likely, he could end up in a situation that's not ideal. But as we saw with Josh Jacobs last year, I guess the Raiders have a good offensive line, but if, say, for example, DeAndre Swift ends up in Miami and say they also sign Melvin Gordon, so they have 2 running backs, that would really be a buzzkill. But right now, sight unseen, I would take DeAndre Swift just because he has relatively little wear and tear. He can catch the ball at an elite level, and I think he's going to have a long career, and he's relatively young.
Yeah, I mean, so DeAndre Swift is okay. So let's just look at some of the raw counting stats here. So 1,216 rush yards, 195 rush attempts, which is over 100 less than Jonathan Taylor, which if for everybody talking about wear and tear, that's a positive. In terms of reception yards, 216 compared to Jonathan Taylor's 209. They both had 24 catches in their 2019 season. So I think a lot of people with DeAndre Swift, they go back to some of his previous seasons, like his 2018 season, he had 32 receptions on 36 targets. And he had 297 receiving yards. So I think the narrative in terms of DeAndre Swift being an elite pass catcher, they exist because obviously he can catch the ball. But you look at some of these high-end running backs, these top 5-6 guys we're going to be talking about today, and they all have around 20 to 30 touches. I like to say that to be like an elite, quote elite pass catcher in college, you need to get about 30 plus receptions in the season, whereas
I mean,
you really want 20 to 30, right? You want to know if they can be involved in that game. So, I mean, DeAndre Swift, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, this is a guy that he is, if you have to say there's going to be a consensus number one, it's probably going to be Swift on most people's boards. Let's see here. So DeAndre Swift, college dominator rating, compliments of playerprofiler.com, 21.1%. College target share. He had a 10% share. He's 21 years old. Similar build actually to Jonathan Taylor. So we didn't talk about it, but
I mean,
Jonathan Taylor's 5'11", 214.
I mean, DeAndre Swift is a little more stout. He's 5'9", 215 pounds. I mean, this is, you
look at a BMI. I'm starting to look at BMI for some of these guys. 31.9 BMI, which is good. Like anything over 30 is pretty much like a tank.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, DeAndre Swift, I don't think there's going to be too many arguments in terms of the 101 or 102. I think, again, it's going to be when we're splitting hairs here, it's likely going to be just due to the actual landing spot for a lot of these guys.
All right. You're up. Pick 3.
All right. So for number 3, I'm going to go with another running back. Guys, there's a trend here. I'm going to go with Cam Akers, running back of Florida State. All right, so Cam Akers, here's the thing. In his actual college stats, they weren't necessarily as gaudy as some of the other players. So he had 1146 rush yards, 231 rush attempts. He had 30 catches off of 36 targets, which I think, we talk about the ability to catch. That is an absolute plus. But he had one of the worst offensive lines in college football last year, which I think really hurt his accounting stats in general. But this is the kind of guy that I think could be an every down back. In terms of his actual metrics, Cam Akers is 5'11", 212 pounds, 29.6 BMI. He has a 39.8% college dominator rating, which is, let's see here. In terms of the class, I want to say is number 3. So it's, he's definitely up there. He's only behind Jonathan Taylor and Keyshawn Vaughn. So this is a guy that I think is going to be drafted highly, and I think he's going to be used in every down role.
Yeah, I mean, and the reason and I don't disagree with Akers at all, especially if he lands in the right running spot. He could end up being the RB1 in this class. And I think what's so good about Cam Akers, you alluded to it about saying about how poor the offensive line and the team was at Florida State, is that he's situation proof. He's already proven that in any situation, any team setup, that he is going to have the talent to overcome that. And I think that's really important. It's a really smart pick. I've seen Cam Akers in early mocks go as low as the 7th pick, as high as the 3rd pick where you just had him. So an interesting player for sure. With the 4th pick in our 2020 very early mock draft is a player that I could see myself jumping up to the first spot. I think, again, I said this in the beginning of our draft, is that any of these in the top 7 or 8 for me can end up being, the order could be flipped depending on landing spot. Yeah. But J.K. Dobbins of Ohio State really just stands out on the tape for me. That was I mean, I urge you to watch his tape, because you'll see basically what I think, so it's here's some of the stats that I pulled on him. Well, when you look at the actual tape, you'll see the burst, you'll see the long speed, you'll see the power. He could put together like multiple cuts. I mean, he just looks like a video game out there. And in the college playoffs, that was very apparent as well. He broke off some long runs. He looked like he was like Le'Veon Bell in a sense, where he lets plays develop. He lets the block set up for him. He looks like an NFL running back. And if this guy gets the backfield to himself, I'm trying to think of a team off the top of my head, I would shoot him up to the top of the board. I really like J.K. Dobbins. I have my eyes on him, and I think I have some irrational love for this guy already as a football player. Yeah, some of the market share numbers too are only second to Jonathan Taylor, but he looks like a player, and I don't think no matter where you pick him, you're going to be disappointed.
Okay, so some of the raw accounting stats for J.K. Dobbins: he had 2,001 rush yards on 298 attempts. He had 23 catches on 29 targets. So He's a guy, again, who can participate pretty much in all facets of the game.
He could do it all, man. He could
and
catch. He can make you miss. He could run between the tackles. I mean, he. There's no weakness to his game as far as I'm seeing early on here.
And another great thing about J.K. Dobbins, and it's so important for these young rookie running backs, is really just the ability to pass block, and J.K. Dobbins can do that. So, I mean, that's definitely a plus for getting him on the actual field. He's 5'10", 216 pounds. Again, high BMI. He's got a 31.0 BMI. So those are important factors. Okay, so I would say in a lot of people's circles, it's pretty much like the top four, right? We'll call it like the elite four in terms of the running backs. So at the 105 pick, I think this is where people need to start making a decision, right? Rookie running backs can have an immediate impact and pretty much like a jolt to the system, to your fantasy team. And rookie wide receivers, not always the same level of just like, again, just that boom oomph to your team. But this is a guy who I think could. So at the 105, I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver of Oklahoma. This is a player that is pretty much a no-brainer type guy. A lot of people had another player, Jerry Jeudy, as the 101 at the start of the season, but it's pretty much now, I would almost call it consensus that it's going to be CeeDee Lamb. So this is a guy who had a 38.1% college dominator rating. Breakout age of 19.4. Breakout age for wide receivers is important. Anything under 20 is typically quite like that's what you want to look at. Same thing. He's 6'3", 195 pounds, right? So when you talk about like your number one wide receiver, he's a guy who can out body players. And I mean, he's just he looks like he is smooth. I think he's pretty much like a consensus wide receiver one. Like, I'm not sure even what else to say about this guy. Like, you want to talk about a guy whose game tape you want to go watch CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, so I think that's a good pick for sure. I mean, and I'll roll into my next pick, and then I want to circle back to something you said with the 106. Again, usually I'm the one going off script a little bit, but I mean, I'm trying to think as if I was actually in this draft, and there's no reason not to take Jerry Jeudy at this point, wide receiver from Alabama. Jerry Jeudy, I mean, like you said, he was the consensus number one. It screams value with this pick. I don't think there's Jeudy versus CeeDee Lamb is going to be the subject of great debate leading up all the way to the draft. And I think they're both going to go in the first round of the real NFL draft, and they're going to be compared to each other. Who's better? Because they are different styles of wide receiver. And we will know for a couple of years who is, one will have a big game and then the other will have a big game. And I think that these are going to be wide receiver rivals for a long time. Would be interesting to see them go in the same division and be paired up in games together. I think that these are going to be two great NFL players, but Jerry Jeudy feels like the safer pick to me with some upside, whereas CeeDee Lamb feels like the higher upside, but there's probably a lower floor. And again, that's just anecdotal. I mean, both of them have the amazing body control. Jeudy, I want to see how he tests at the combine, but I don't think it'll be elite, but I think it'll be as far his route running is what really separates him.
Yes.
And I mean, just look back in his last game at a regular season in the Citrus Bowl when Jerry Jeudy had 6 catches for over 200 yards and a touchdown. I mean, he just looked like he was dominating players on the field. It didn't even look like he was in the same species as some of those defenders. So Jerry Jeudy at pick 6 to me, I would go crazy if I had the middle of the draft. I ended up with a wide receiver like Jeudy who could probably contribute right away.
Well, and I mean, obviously the last season was not as great as the sophomore season, but I mean, he played with Tua, right? So Tua was out last year, which makes obviously a huge difference. We know how important, more than anything else, the wide receiver production is based off of the quarterback talent around him. And this is a guy who, frankly, didn't have the same level of talent. So I think, Al, this might be actually a good time to maybe end.
Well, what we'll do is we'll do part 2 of our mock draft next week. I think this is good. So just review the picks again real quick. Who number 1 you picked?
Okay, so my pick was Jonathan Taylor at the 101. You went with DeAndre Swift at the 102. I mean, pretty much you can flip those two guys around. You're going to be pretty happy. At 103, I had Cam Akers. At 104, you had J.K. Dobbins. So that's 4 running backs that went off as our top 4 picks. And then at 105, I had CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver. And at 106, you took Jerry Jeudy, wide
Yeah,
receiver.
not a ton of surprises, but you know what?
No.
That's this could get flipped on its head. What's so
Absolutely.
interesting is not who the top 6 are, but the order in which they go. I mean, if Jerry Jeudy ends up in say Aaron Rodgers' offense, so I'm going to be more interested in him. And say if CeeDee Lamb ends up in a situation where he is the clear third receiver with an offense we don't love. I mean, it's say he ends up in the Jets offense with Adam Gase. I mean, we may flip them. I mean, wouldn't you take Jeudy as a Green Bay Packer, the number 2 in the Green Bay Packers, over CeeDee Lamb and an Adam Gase offense?
Of course.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So,
right?
Yeah. So this is just based on our first pass. And also, what's really cool is that in Superflex, this is all going to get flipped on its head. I mean, the first 3 or 4 picks might be QBs. I mean, if you include Jordan Love, what if he goes to a good situation and he's not drafted as a backup?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that I think it's exciting. At this point, if you own one of those top 6 picks, or in Superflex one of those top 8 picks, you're probably pretty happy. But as we'll pretty much discuss next episode, where we'll be doing the second half of the first round, there's going to be a lot of depth here. So one of the plays last year, especially after a guy like A.J. Brown went to the Tennessee Titans and scared a lot of people off, people tried to trade out of those early picks and accumulate some of that late first round, early second round depth. That's, I think, going to be pretty exciting to talk about. So we'll get into that next week.
Absolutely. But this is a good first pass, man. This is a good first pass. Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, people could find me on Twitter at Alan Seslowsky, AlanSeslowsky. Give a follow. Also, follow this. If you're listening on the YouTube channel, ring the bell, give it a like, get notified when we go live. We're usually going to do it on Sunday. And also over at DFS Army, I'm in the Slack chats hanging out over there talking Dynasty Fantasy Football. And I say it every week, but Shane, I really do hope as we get into the offseason, you will come on and add your perspective as I talk about this with the Geek, because I do love listening to your opinions. I think you have really good takes on this stuff.
I love it. You can follow me on Twitter at Sealy_Shane. You can also follow who I moonlight as on Twitter as the Flex Network 1. You can download our podcast pretty much anywhere you find podcasts, on Spotify. Tell your friends. We're just getting into the rookies here. I'm excited. I think it's an amazing season. And please join us next week. We are the Flex Network.